Once the data being processed and interpolated, we can now move on to interpreting the data. Before this, just go to the 3D tab and just go to the settings and make sure that the use thickness option is deselected and that you've rerun the interpolation before you go ahead and do the interpretation. And this is because we just want a very thin time slice, a single time slice in the 3D view for the interpretation. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick out a utility for a marking, and I have two options when it comes to the interpretation. I can insert markers into the 2D view, or I can insert a polyline into the 3D view. I'm going to start off with the marker option, and when I've created those markers, I can then actually connect them together to create a polyline. So you've got the two options here to create the polylines across the data set. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick out a utility, and we have here a utility crossing. And I know in this case that it's a telecoms cable. The first thing to do is to pick one end of the line to start marking. So I've selected a response, a nice response on the right hand side of the data. I'm using the icon, the indicator in the top in the 3D view to make sure I'm over the correct utility. So I'm going to pick out, and there's the hyperbolic response from that telecom cable. So let's go ahead and choose a new group. We can select the correct utility. We can give the marker a shape. Let's keep it at a cross at this point. I'm also going to reduce the size of that marker as well. Let's go ahead and mark that first one in the correct position. It's also important to make sure that you've got the correct velocity set before we go ahead and put the markers in. So there's the first marker. We can move along into the center of the data. Let's go and pick that one. Slightly less response in the data there. And just move up or down a few profiles to get a better response from the data. There we go. And we can just click again in the correct position. And then I'm going to move to the opposite end of the data set. Again, just going to find the position of that utility. I accidentally placed a marker into the data there, so I'm just going to use the Control Z just to remove that, the undo button. And we'll just move a bit further over. Get right up against the edge. Again, let's just move up and down a few of the profiles to get the best response, and then we're going to mark it at that position there. So I've got 3 markers across there, and I can then go to the connect or convert group to polyline option, and that will create that polyline across the data set like so. That's one option. The next option then would be to place a polyline actually into the 3D. So let's go ahead and pick out another utility. Let's take this one, crossing again the street. I'm going to select the hide all option, and I'm going to just go and pick out the utility. So it starts on that side there. So let's go to the polyline option, create new polyline again. In this instance, we're going to pick out that this is an electric cable, power cable, reduce the size once again. And I can just go into the data on the 3D view and click, mark the utility running across the street, like so. If you wish, you can unconvert that polyline back to the markers if needed. If you've made a mistake, you can delete one of these, or we can reconnect them like so. And take note here that the Z value or the Z value of these markers and polyline will be dependent on where you've set on the time slice. So make sure that you've selected the correct depth for that feature in the data. One final option is that we can actually insert a polygon, and this could be used in this case maybe to mark a manhole cover. You can use this to mark other features in the data, and we have one sat in the data here. I'll just place that in the center, create new polygon, sorry. You can give it a name if you want, and we can just click around that feature in the data. Then we can give that a color. And again, we know that this case it's a telecoms, so I'll give that the orange coloration, like so. Going back to any of the markers, we can, once you're happy with this, we can give it a name. So we can call this electric. And again, in this instance, we know it's a low voltage, so I'm just going to give that an LV, low voltage. Go back to the marker, and we can give that telecoms. So we can actually give the marker a name. You can give it a number if you want, etc. There's a few options for inserting markers and polylines and polygons into the data. Once that's completed, then we can then move on to the export of the data, and in this case, maybe via DXF, CSV, text files, etc.